Hello and welcome to another In a Nutshell video. In this video, we are going to look at topic 3C in the Christianity component of the Religious Studies A-Level from Eduqas. Topic 3C looks at feminist theology, which is theology that considers Christianity from the perspective of women. It recognises that the Church has played a significant role in the oppression of women over the past 2,000 years. Both Rosemary Radford Ruether and Mary Daly are important feminist theologians. In this video, we are going to focus on Ruether. Ruether believes that there is more to Christianity than sexism, and she argues that biblical and theological traditions have reflected the cultural view that males are more human than women. She argues that Scripture has a sexist bias, as it was written by men. This is called androcentrism, which means male-centered. For example, sin entered the world due to Eve. It is woman who is held responsible. Also, both the Old and New Testaments suggest that women should be subject to men. For example, in Genesis, it says that your husband will rule over you, and in St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, that wives should submit to their husbands. Ruether also notes that some theologians have compared women to misbegotten males, and that traditionally the male pronoun is applied to God. It can also lead to idolatry if Christians are under the impression that the male Jesus saved humans from sin and that males are closer to God than women. Ruether writes about the comparison between Mary and Eve. Mary is a passive, perpetual virgin and an obedient woman, while Eve is a bringer of sin. Women have often been associated with qualities of one of these women. Ruether argues that this perception and gender stereotyping of women did allow for the persecution of women as witches in the 15th and 16th centuries. She also argues that this is one of the reasons why women have been traditionally excluded from ordination. In fact, the Vatican in 1976 stated that there must be a physical resemblance between the priest and Christ. In other words, male genitalia. Ruether does point to a number of forms of Christianity that were more inclusive of the role of women. In Montanist churches, men and women were given equal status. Quakers were one of the first denominations to include women in leadership roles, and a group called Shakers view God as androgynous, which means God has male and female characteristics. Now, Ruether is clear that these groups are in no way perfect, but that they do show that sexism is not an inherent part of all Christian groups. Ruether sees feminist theology as part of the prophetic tradition in the Bible, just like the prophets stood up for the oppressed. The prophets challenged all forms of oppression and systems of power, and spoke of how injustice would end during the reign of God. In the New Testament, Jesus stood up for the oppressed regularly, and he often treated women equally to men. For example, Mary Magdalene. Early Christians also lived in a community where people were equals in mutual service. Ruether argues that Christians today should return to the view of Jesus, the view that being male is of no greater importance than being female. Ruether claims that there have been some movements in the 20th century to liberate women from sexism. She says that although each has failed, they all have helpful ideals. Romanticism suggested that people need to embrace female qualities such as emotional sensitivity and moral purity to avoid the male traits that often lead to violence and war. This view sees maleness and femaleness as complementary. However, it does still value those so-called feminine qualities. Liberalism has attempted to fight for social reform, for example, the right to vote, equal pay, and birth control. However, Ruether criticises that this has also led to classist views. Thirdly, Marxism has viewed men and women as equally capable of contributing to society, so women should be freed from the patriarchal systems. However, in this view, women are valued for their productivity rather than for themselves. Ruether argues that women need to create base communities within the church which are free from patriarchy, that fight against oppression of women by supporting charities like domestic abuse shelters. And these communities should have an inclusive leadership where women can be ordained. These groups should also remove clericalism, which suppresses the laity and upholds the patriarchy. They should also accept the full equality between the genders. This is where Ruether and Mary Daly contrast significantly, as Daly argues that women should leave the church entirely, as it can never be reformed. I will finish with this quote from Ruether, which says, "No part of the church is liberated until we are all liberated." Thanks for watching, and make sure you press the subscribe button down below.